All right, good morning, guys. So we're going to go over our next chapter, next PowerPoint, which is basically anatomy physiology, and we're going to look at the human body specifically right now. So here we go. Let's go over the basics. You have your notes. Go ahead and follow along, please. A couple of diagrams in here that you'll probably see again. Muscular system here, different parts of the muscle system. There are over 600 different different muscles within the human body that you need to be aware of. We're not going to go into all those. These are the basics. You may see this diagram again. Okay, the human body anatomy. We're going to talk about topographical anatomy, gross anatomy, and microscopic anatomy. So topographical anatomy, what this really is landmarks, places we can identify so we need to think about it in EMR, in trying to identify where injuries and illness probably are going to be located, right? So topographical would be the cranium, would be the thoracic cavity, also looking at left lateral, right lateral, medial. So it's giving us landmarks where we can actually identify things. Gross anatomy, this is not what you think. It's not gross, sick, disgusting. It is large, okay? So this would be the thoracic cavity. This would be the abdominal. This would be the lower extremity, the large portions of anatomy that we can pinpoint and identify. And then microscopic anatomy, which is just that small stuff that we really can't see with the naked eye kind of thing. Physiology, homeostasis, an important concept to understand. You guys are going to learn more about this. What is homeostasis? It's where things work harmoniously together. And the most simple explanation of this would be your heart and your lungs, your cardiovascular system and your respiratory system. These two things work in homeostasis. They work together. If they are not working together, they don't function properly at all. So we want to make sure that they work together. You definitely will be seeing this here pretty soon, the skeletal system. We're going to go through different parts. We have about 20 bones that we'll need to know. There are 206 named bones in the human body, and I'm going to discuss this with you verbally when we get together for a lecture, because there's something I want you to understand about the 206 named bones of the human body. Skeletal system consists of gross anatomy, large portions, the skull, the spinal column, thoracic cage, the pelvic girdle, shoulder girdle, upper extremities, lower extremities. Kind of a basic, simple understanding of what we have going on here. The skull, though, as we start breaking this down further, okay, we have the skull, we have the cranium, we have the mandible. The cranium itself has about 4 different pieces that create this whole cranium. And then there are 14 different bones within the facial bones, which you're looking at right here. The facial bones is all right here, okay? This is the cranium up above here where your brain is basically protected, and this is all the facial bones. Now, talks about the mandible here, okay? And so we have the mandible, which is the bottom portion of the jaw here. This is one of the only movable bones within the skull. The entire skull is fixed. It does not move. But this is on a hinge joint that allows your bottom jaw to drop down, which is the mandible. The top is referred to as the maxillae. It's not movable. There are only a few other bones in your skull that are actually movable, and those would be the microscopic type anatomy, and those would be in your ears. They're the incus, stapes, and malleolus. They are what actually collect sound. They kind of free float, and as I'm speaking right now and you're hearing sound come through your ears, those 3 bones are vibrating, tapping against each other, sending that information to your brain, turning those waves, those sound waves that you're receiving, and turning it into words. And that's kind of interesting in itself too. The fact that right now you're not hearing me speak words, you're receiving vibrations through the air that then is translated through those incus, stapes, malleolus bones into the brain, creating actual sound, creating actual words. Okay, skeletal system. Again, you will definitely see this. We're going to break this down further. This is the spinal column. It's broken into these 5 different sections: the cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and coccyx regions. There are 7 cervical vertebrae. There are 12 thoracic vertebrae. There are 5 lumbar vertebrae. There is 1 or 4 sacral and 1 or 4 coccyx. And I explain that way because these are broken into actual vertebrae, just like you see here, but they are fused together so they don't move. So you can see at one point they actually were individuals just like this, flexible and movable. But over time, we no longer needed these to be flexible and movable, so they fused together to create these two areas, the sacral and coccyx. If you can kind of delve into that a little deeper and figure things out, you'll understand exactly what we're talking about here. So the cervical vertebrae, like I said, there's 7 of them. How do I remember this? Things to do to remember how many vertebrae you'll find in these different areas. And here's what I do. These 7 vertebrae, you have breakfast at 7 o'clock. There were 12 thoracic, right? Because you have lunch at noon, 12 o'clock. And lumbar, there are 5. You have dinner at 5 o'clock. So here's how you remember 7, 12, and 5. Breakfast at 7, lunch at 12, dinner at 5. And the last ones is 5 and 4. 5 and 4 is what you actually have to remember there. So we're also going to go through the numbers of vertebrae that are actually in the spinal column too. We'll kind of figure that out because it can be looked at in 2 ways. And we'll discuss that a little bit further as to why it's looked at in 2 ways. Skeletal system, we're looking at the thoracic cage. You would definitely see this in a diagram again. The rib cage, 12 pairs of ribs, 10 pairs attached to the actual sternum. And then you have the rest that are either indirectly attached or false. So these are true ribs right here, okay? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which are true ribs because you can see they're directly attached through cartilage, directly attached to the sternum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are direct or indirectly attached to the sternum because they attach to each other and then to the sternum. So these are false ribs. And these last 2, 1 and 2 right here, are free floating ribs. So we have true ribs, false ribs, free floating ribs. Okay. And these all together create the 12 on one side, 12 on the other side, 24 total ribs altogether. The sternum in the center here, where we actually do CPR on this portion of the sternum right here, because the heart sits right about here, okay? And we're actually pushing the heart down against the backbone to actually compress it during CPR. This is the body of the sternum. This is the manubrium, and this is the xiphoid, and we'll discuss this a little bit further as well, okay? All of this, including the spine, creates the thoracic cage. Skeletal system, the pelvic girdle. We have the pelvis, the ilium, which is where your belt would sit, basically right here. The ischium, which is right down inside here, guys. Sorry, right down inside here. And the pubis, which is the entire structure itself. The pubis is, pubis is right here, and the ilium is, ischium is right here. So these are how we identify the different parts of this, the pelvic girdle. Check this out, though. The skull is divided into pieces, right? When you're first born, these pieces are free floating and allow your head to contort as you pass through the birth canal. So, you know, we look at the skull as one, but it's actually 4 different pieces, right? Well, the pelvic region is no different. It also is in pieces so that it can contort slightly when it comes through the birth canal. Over time, it begins to fuse back together to create this entire structure. It looks the same. It doesn't really look much different, but it does fuse together later. Shoulder girdles up here. We have the clavicle and scapula. These 2 pieces, the scapula and the clavicle here, are the main portions of your shoulder girdle, allowing your arm to rotate and move. The clavicle is, I'm sure we can find a few people in class that have broken this before, and several people who know someone who has broken this before, because this is the most commonly broken bone in the body. Definitely kind of an interesting subject to understand. Upper extremities, we have the arm, so we have the humerus, we have the ulna, the radius, we have the, which create the wrist bone, the carpals, metacarpals, we have all these different bones located in the upper region, upper extremity, plus we have the lower upper extremity and the upper extremity. Lower extremity, femur, knee, patella, tibia, fibula, ankle, tarsals, and metatarsals. We are going to go through all these, guys, so we can discuss this a little bit deeper. These are what you'd find in the lower extremity, and I want to make sure you understand right here, this bone, the femur, is the longest, strongest bone in the body. Skeletal system, joints, immovable, slightly immovable, freely movable. You guys are going to do some work on this specifically so you understand these. The hinge joint, ball and socket joint, glide joint, and saddle joints are some of the common different types of joints you would find in your body. you are going to do some work on this and kind of break some of this down so you know what there is. And there's more than just these joints. There are more joints in our body than just these. Musculoskeletal system, as we just saw this muscular system earlier. Again, we're going to go through this another time. We'll look at these, but I want to talk about these right here. This will be the last piece, okay? Types of muscle. We have voluntary and involuntary. So we have three types of muscle in the body. We have skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. Skeletal muscle in itself is your muscle that wraps around your bones, okay? And this muscle actually helps you move and function throughout the day. The cardiac muscle is related to your heart only. It is unique in itself. It runs 100 miles an hour, 24/7, never stops, never sleeps, which is cool stuff. Okay, and then you have the smooth muscle, which is actually muscle that is of your digestive system. Typically, is where we find the majority of all of our smooth muscle. In these three types of muscles, we have two categories, which are voluntary, involuntary. Involuntary means it functions without thinking. That is smooth muscle and cardiac. There's no thought process. I don't need to think about my heart beating. It beats on its own. Okay. I don't need to think about digestion. It functions on its own. Voluntary is skeletal. I have to think about it happening. I have to think about it functioning. This is how this type of muscle works. We're going to delve deeper into this as well as we get back and talk openly about some of this stuff. So hopefully you got some good information out of all this, guys. This is like I was saying, this is the anatomy physiology portion. We skipped over not skipped over, excuse me. We worked on chapter 4, and we're going to combine 4 with 5. So you guys know, don't worry about a test on chapter 4. Okay, that's all I got for you today. Make sure you took those notes. Thank you very much. Bye.